2, 1. Let's go. It's time to Dad Up. Welcome to the Dad Up Podcast, the podcast for dads about dads being dads. Get ready for exciting guests talking about their experiences of parenting, the good and the not so good. Bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode, and let's get started. Here is your host, Bryan Ward.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm super excited for the guest I have on. He's become a good friend of mine. He's a fellow podcaster himself. He and I kind of run in the same line of podcasters, but he and I have gotten a chance to really connect. So I'm super excited to have Danny DelVecchio to Dad Up. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Bryan. Thank you so much. I'm happy and honored to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. For my listeners who may not know who you are, what you do, I kind of want to know a backstory of Danny. I want to know a little bit more about you and, kind of the overall backstory, your history, how you grew up. And then obviously this is a dad podcast. So I want to know about your family, your wife and your kids.
Okay, cool. So where to start? Well, let's start with where I grew up. So I grew up in Long Island and I am still here, 38 years old and still here in Long Island. Grew up in a small town called Limbrook, really good schools, very good community, great parents, and, really a great place to raise a family here. And I am a dad of two. So I have two boys. One is 4 and the other one is 2, Lucas and Julian. And again, we are here in Long Island. And I, as far as a little bit of background on me, I started getting into podcasting myself back in 2014 and really doing it totally for fun, just kind of BSing with my good friend about TV and movies. And, I enjoyed it so much. I loved the medium that I decided to start another podcast. And I started this other podcast with really, again, same kind of thing, no expectation, definitely doing it as a hobby. And this podcast was about a TV show called Impractical Jokers. I don't know if you're familiar. You ever watch that show, Bryan?
I do. I love that show.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows. It's just like, it's 4 guys. They're from New York. They're like in their mid 30s and they just kind of like made it big and
right.
they crack me up, so I definitely was very, attached to that show and I loved it so much. And there's so many podcasts about TV shows and that show did not have a podcast about it. So I was like, I'm going to start one. So I started this Impractical Jokers fan podcast and we were number 1 on the iTunes new and noteworthy. We were number 3 in the iTunes TV and film category.
Really?
We did like 300,000 something downloads in 60 episodes on that show. And it was a lot of fun. We were able to connect with a bunch of people within the network of Impractical Jokers. So some of the stand-up comedians that they worked with on their tour. We had some of the producers and writers from the show. And we actually even had James Murr from Practical Jokers was on our podcast as well.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And we got selected to participate in New York City Podcast Festival and do a live show. And we did a live show and a couple of the comedy producers and writers from the show joined us. And it was pretty cool to actually have a live show. Like there was people that came from the UK all the way out to New York to see our live show, which was like unbelievable to me. So it was just something that I never anticipated happening with this podcast. Like we grew this really like awesome community of Impractical Jokers fans. And then what ultimately happened was I had got this promotion at work at the time. And my co-host actually, he was really busy. He had just had a second child and he had a lot going on with work and he was moving. And he's like, I just can't do it anymore. And he quit. And I tried to keep it going on my own with just doing interviews with people from the show. And I couldn't keep it going. And ultimately I walked away from the audience and the community that we had. and I retired that show a few years back, and like no regrets, no regrets, but I definitely wish at some point that at that point in time that I could have kept it going and tried to do something differently. But anyway, fast forward a couple years, we get into the whole COVID thing, and I had a little bit more time on my hands. I wasn't traveling as much for work anymore. And I said, you know what, I really want to get back into podcasting. And I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do. And then I thought about the thing that mattered to me most, which is, raising my sons. And that's how I settled on my podcast, which was called For My Sons. And the original idea for my podcast was to interview people that have been influential to me in my life in some capacity, and share their experience and their perspective, so that my sons, when they grow older, they can come back and listen to all these episodes and learn from these influential people and everything like that. And then I thought at the same time, obviously, if I'm getting value, or and my sons are getting value from, or my sons, when they're older, are getting value from what other people are saying, that there's a ton of other parents and fathers and just really anyone that can go ahead and get that same value from these conversations. And that was the original thought behind my behind my podcast. And then it kind of morphed into just like focusing solely on the parenting aspect. And that's where I'm at right now. I just actually changed the name and the brand of the show. I changed it to Freedom to Parent. And you'll have an episode coming up here shortly. Actually, it'll probably be released by the time this one comes out.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you had that prior podcast. That's cool. One of I've tried to get a couple of those guys, not a couple, only one of them has a kid. I've tried to get
Joe Gatto.
I've tried to get Joe on the show. Have you ever thought about, because you have this connection with Murr now, and obviously they're a little bigger now than they were a couple of years ago, but
oh yeah,
have you ever thought about getting Joe on the show?
Yeah, I've been trying for sure. Yeah. He's definitely like an ideal guest, because, and not just because obviously he is the only one of them that is a father, but he does have he does bring a lot of other value to his community. He does a lot with like anti-bullying. He also does a lot with animals, and he's a big dog guy. So like, yeah. He does a lot of charity work. I know he does like a lot of charity work for this Daniel's Music Foundation. So, there's a lot of other value that I think that he can bring to the table outside of, just, what he can bring on the parenting side, because I'd love to hear his perspective on that too.
Right. Well, that's cool. Well, is there any, have you had any thoughts of trying to revamp that podcast and maybe run both your podcasts?
Oh, you know what? I haven't really. I mean, I haven't said that it like hasn't crossed my mind. I mean, the thoughts definitely crossed my mind for sure, but I'm trying to figure out how I could potentially pull it off. I'm not sure what I would do, without my former co-host. That was a big help with that show. So I don't know. I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility, but it's definitely on the back burner for now.
Yeah.
It's doing a podcast. Doing a podcast is a lot of work, especially when you also have a full-time job. You're doing people don't realize like how much work goes into the podcast. Like there's recording the episodes, right? There's booking guests. That's a giant endeavor in and of itself. There's editing. And then, of course, there's the biggest part, which is promoting it and getting the word out there on social media and everything like that. That's probably the most time-consuming part of being a podcaster. So, little insight into podcasters for you right there.
Yeah. One more question about that podcast. Now,
sure.
Was it just interviews, or did you try to do like skit type work during the podcast?
So originally, we did a couple of things. Like what we would do is we would record our episodes the day after the episode aired, the new episode of Impractical Jokers aired. And what we would do is we had a lot of fan interaction in our podcast. We literally break down the episode. Like we would talk about the challenges and what our favorite jokes were from those challenges and how they handled those challenges, and then we would rate the punishment. So we would rate the punishment from like 1 to 10, and we had a Joker of the Week segment, so where we put it out there for all of our listeners to go ahead and vote for who was the Joker of the Week, and we would then reveal that. We had a question of the week. And on the question of the week, basically, we would ask a question and people would leave us a voicemail. And we would usually play like 1 or 2 responses in relation to that, question of the week. We just did like all kinds of fun stuff. And then we mixed interviews into that as well.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I vote to restart the podcast. Get that going.
Where's Larry podcast? That was the name of it. Where's Larry podcast?
Oh, that's funny. That's cool. Yeah, I'm a huge Impractical Jokers fan, and I mean, it's interesting. They've done so many. I mean, shoot, they've had what 10, 12 seasons or something like that. I mean,
yeah. I think they're either on season 10 or season 11. I can't even remember. Yeah. It's crazy.
And then they do a ton of episodes in each season. I think I have on my DVR right now. I think I have even repeats that I've already seen that I'll watch again. It's one of those shows that you could watch over and over again.
Yeah, and like during the time we were doing the podcast, which was like I would say in and around like seasons 4, 5, and 6. That's when like we really had it going. Like when they were in the UK, they did like a big UK episode. And that was definitely, and we had the executive producer, Pete McPartland. He was on our show for like their UK episode. And, that was like kind of like a special episode for us. Right. And like anytime they did like a season finale, we would do like a big episode for that. So it was the time that they did the challenge, the tightrope, where they walked across the tightrope in New York City with like between the buildings. That was a big episode that we did. And it was a lot of fun. And I got to meet a lot of great people. Like I got to meet I've been to the office. The production company that puts out Impractical Jokers is called North South Productions. And I got to go up to the North South Productions office and actually record my podcast from the North South writers room. Cool. With 6 of the writers from Impractical Jokers were sitting in the room. And like we did a holiday special with those guys. A lot of fun.
That's so cool.
It was really awesome.
That's awesome. Well, very cool. Well, I just for my listeners, this is not an episode of Dad Up where we're going to talk about Impractical Jokers the whole time. I do want to get into to Danny's fatherhood role, but just kind of transitioning. First of all, congratulations on that success, and hopefully maybe one of these days you'll start it back up again. But now you've gotten this new journey where you've kind of transitioned into you're. I would call you a fairly new dad, with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. You're a fairly new dad, but you've got this podcast going now. What's your hopes for the podcast, and what are you hoping that this does for dads out there that they could take from your podcast if they were to listen to it? What would you hope that they're taking from it?
Yeah, so like right now, what I'm trying to do is really 3 things. Right, I'm trying to accomplish 3 things in my podcast. Number 1 is to share my journey and my experience with fatherhood, right? And not just the things that I've done well, but the things that I feel like I've screwed up on and how we've gone back and fixed that, because that's really, I feel like, how you learn from other people, right? So, to share my experience is number 1. Number 2 now is to share like important information that I feel like is out there, like that parents need to know. So like sharing different stories or, things that are going on in the world that may impact your parenting decisions. And that's sort of the new piece that I'm bringing into Freedom to Parent, right? And then the third thing that I'm trying to accomplish is to learn from parents and build this community and where people can feel comfortable to learn from each other, right? Because there's this proverb, and my wife is the one that like really hit me with this one, which is like, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And the whole idea of a community and helping each other out and learning from each other. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do. And that's why I love to connect with people like you and join other like parenting podcasts and connect with other people that do really great parenting content. There's so many people out there that are trying to do that have like very similar missions that align with what you and I do. And like being able to connect with them has been probably the best part of me starting this podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's important. You're right. It does take a village, and I think it's been one of the things that I've enjoyed about doing my show is just meeting the different dads and meeting the different people out there that all we want in life is to really be the best dad that we can be for our kids, and hopefully inspire generations that are growing up to kind of follow that path and kind of change this dynamic of parenthood or fatherhood. So I think that's cool. And I do, encourage you to keep going because it's a fun ride, and I've learned a lot. I'm sure you have as well. But, kind of transitioning into just that dad role now, let me ask you this. When you think about fatherhood, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to Danny?
So, I mean, exactly what you said, like just doing every single thing that I possibly can to, make sure that my kids are enjoying my life, are enjoying their lives now as they grow up, and then setting them up to be prepared for the future. Mm-hmm. And teaching them, critical thinking and making sure that, they are well behaved and raising them to be gentlemen. Right. And just showing up, a lot of the, many people will tell you that the number one thing that you could do as a dad is just to show up. Right. And I feel like I show up a lot more than most.
Right. Right.
There's a lot of things that I try to do for my kids, including like cooking dinner for them every night and making sure that they eat healthy. So, little things that you can do, yield big results and help develop, these kids into what I hope to be are, strong and confident young men.
Awesome. Yeah. When I think about fatherhood, I think about, just making sure that I'm leaving a legacy behind for my boys. And obviously our goal is to make sure that we're raising productive, human beings, productive members of society. And, if we can teach our kids how to be independent, I think is important. And when I speak about independence, I think about, your boys are 4 and 2, your oldest now 4. He's probably wanting to experience a little bit of independence. I mean, there's probably times where he wants to do things on his own. What's been the biggest challenge that you've had with your boys? Because you got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. The 4-year-old's kind of starting to build this independent personality. Like he wants to do everything himself, but the 2-year-old really can't. But the 2-year-old wants to follow what the older brother's doing.
Oh, for sure.
So how do you deal with those challenges? I mean, you have to parent 2 different ways. And so how do you and your wife deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, as far as like one of the biggest challenges that we've had, and this is, more recent. People have always applauded us that our kids are very well behaved, right? And not just family members or friends. Like when we go out to a restaurant or something like that, and there will be times that strangers will come over to us and just say, "Hey, I'm very impressed that your boys were so well behaved for this long period of time, like, and didn't bother us," right? So, but one of the challenges that we've really had recently is my older son, Lucas, with, just not really not listening. Right. And like not listening to the point where just like and this is the independence thing right now. Right. And that's definitely what this is about, because it's Lucas's world, and if you try to tell him that this is not a good idea and that you should not be doing this particular thing, he gets upset because he has a very vivid imagination, and he wants to do all kinds of crazy things, right? And sometimes they just need to be shut down because for his safety or whatever reason, right? And he pushes back, and he was getting to the point where it was, a little bit, he was getting very upset, right? And then what happens is, like, when he's not listening, is that gets us upset too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we react. And, my wife and I, will be like, trying to tell him to not do something 3 times, and then 4 times, and then 5 times. Now we're having a shouting match and things like this. So, we really needed to find a way to do something that prevented us from having to, like, yell at him. Right. So and this is brand new. I was like, hey, you know what? Let's create some sort of incentive for him where he can earn whatever it is, some sort of reward for displaying the right behavior.
And you just made a post about this, right?
I did. I put it out this morning. So basically I created this board, and it's his listening board. And I sat him down. I said, hey, this is your listening board. And, basically what we want to do with this thing is we want to make sure we need you to be a better listener. We want you to be a better listener, because that'll be a good thing for everybody, because mommy and daddy don't want to be yelling at you for not listening. And so you being a good listener is now going to earn you certain privileges. And those privileges include time on the iPad. They include TV time. So what we do is, like, if I give them one freebie, like the first one's free, you know what I mean? Like you get 1X, strike 1 is free. You're 4 years old. You're not going to be a perfect listener. I'm not asking for perfection, right? So the first one is a freebie. And with the second one, that loses him some time on the iPad or on the TV the next day. And then the third one wipes out TV and iPad for the entire next day. And then what we've done is, like, if you get 3 strikes, or if you make it through the day without getting 3 strikes, at the end of the day, you get a happy face on the board. And if you get 10 days in a row of happy faces, we'll do something special. And that something special could be like me taking him out for a burger, just the 2 of us, or my wife taking him out, for pizza or something, just the 2 of them, or ice cream. Or it could be us doing a movie night, or a sleepover at grandma's, like anything, like little things, like things that we would probably do for him anyway, as special things, but making him earn it. Right. And, it's been 10 days, and he hasn't had any days with 3 strikes. He's had days with 2. And there was a couple days where we were a little bit lenient on him, for sure. But we want him to hit the 10-day mark, and we want to celebrate, the fact that he's improving. And we've seen a very significant improvement in the 10 days. And probably the most influential, best part about it is that instead of us going to yell at him, is we say, hey, Lukey, remember your board. Remember, we don't want to get a strike on the board. So now, instead of us yelling, we have a way to deal with it without getting worked up. And that's been the biggest. And so it's been more helpful for me and my wife than it probably has even for him. But we've seen improvement in him in just the short 10-day period.
That's awesome. That's cool. And you know what he's learning? He's learning how to control his behavior. And so that's cool. I mean, the board is something that you guys have probably never tried any type of board before. But this listening board is really cool. And like I said, he's learning how to control his behavior. And in turn, that teaches you guys how to control your behavior, right? So it works both ways. So that's
like I said, it's probably been more, it's been more helpful to us because of the fact that, we now have something else that we can do and something else that we can reference, as opposed to getting upset. And that's been a big deal for us.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, when I think about, listening to your parents, I think about my own parents and some of the struggles that I went through as a kid. And then how I've implemented some of those struggles or some of those lessons that I learned from my parents into my own parenting role. What kind of things have you learned from your parents that you've kind of adapted into your parenting role now? Or maybe things that you learned that you said, yeah, no, that's not going to work in my family, and I'm going to try something else. What do you think what are some of the lessons you've learned from your parents?
So I would say that the number one lesson that I've learned from my parents is just, like I said, just to be there and be active and be involved. My parents have always been involved, sometimes more involved than I want them to be. And that's okay, right? Because like, I'll take that over them not being involved at all any day, right? So, the fact that, they always showed up. I mean, I don't think my dad ever missed a game, or my mom ever missed one of my games or anything like that. My mom went to every single PTA meeting. She was the president of the PTA. She was extremely involved in the school and the community and really trying to get, to do what was right for us kids. Right. So I would say that's probably the most important thing that I've learned from them.
Yeah. And, that's good. That's good that they taught you those lessons, and you've adapted it as a parent yourself. I learned those same lessons from my parents, but I took it to the opposite, where my parents were there, but they weren't really involved in the stuff that I was doing, just because they worked full-time jobs, no fault of theirs. They just worked full-time jobs. And so they weren't really active in all the things that I was doing. So I knew that type of parenting wasn't going to work for me as a parent. So they I guess taught me how to be an active parent by I guess the lack of activity that I had from them, or involvement that I had from them. So that's why I said it could go, you can learn the good and the bad,
Yeah. And like, I mean, on the other hand, I felt like my parents gave me way too much freedom to like to screw things up. You know what I mean? Like I felt like they could have been a little bit harder on me. And that would have kind of, again, like, always no regrets, but like maybe there would have been some different things like during my childhood, because I screwed up a lot in my teenage years and everything. Like I was, once I got to high school, I was screwing up a lot. And I wish that there was even like some more discipline, right? So like I know with my and again, like, and it could have been super difficult. I was probably a very difficult child for them to handle, right? So and I may be faced with the same thing, because I look at my little one and it's like looking in the mirror. So it's, there are things that I wanted to do differently than what they did, right? And probably the big one is like is around discipline. So it does go. Of course, it goes both ways.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Let me ask you this. If I were to ask your kids, I know they're 4 and 2, and they probably give me some goofy answer right now, but if I were to ask your kids, tell me something about your dad, what would you hope that they would say about you?
That we just have a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
That's what I would like. That's what I would want them to say, is like when they see me, they get super excited, because we're always having fun. They are my best friends, and we just try to do fun. And like, as long as we're together and we're doing something, we're having fun.
Awesome. Well, very cool for that. Danny, if my listeners want to look you up, learn a little bit more about you, best places for them to do that.
Instagram is my hub. You can find me there. I am at Dad Podcaster. So that's probably the best way to find me. And you can find me also at freedomtoparent.net. That's my new website. And also I do have a Facebook group as well, which is Freedom to Parent. And again, if you go to my Instagram, all my links you click the link in my bio, and that'll take you to the group, and as well as to the podcast, and I do clubhouse rooms on a weekly basis for parents. So if anyone wants to come in and just chat about whatever's going on, whatever struggles they're going through, or whatever wins that they want to discuss in our room, I'm doing that right now. Try to, it's a little bit more interactive, with the clubhouse thing. So that's what I'm working on right now. So Dad Podcaster on Instagram, and that will take you to anywhere else that you need to go.
Awesome. Well, listen, Danny, it's been an honor and pleasure to have you on. I've enjoyed our our friendship, our connection over the last couple of months. Looking forward to watching you continue to grow and kind of go through this journey of podcasting and see where it leads you. But really appreciate you being on Dad Up, brother.
I appreciate you having me, Bryan, and I look forward to some future collaborations as well, because I know that we're both head first going out there and trying to put things out for the dad community and for the parenting community. So I'm sure that we will collaborate on future projects as well.
Awesome. Well, listen, everybody, this has been another episode of Dad Up Podcast. Thank you very much to Danny DelVecchio who came on. Make sure you guys are checking him out on his Instagram and also on his website and his podcast. I'll make sure to put those links in my bio, but make sure you guys continue to check out Dad Up Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing, leaving a rating, leaving me a review, and look forward to hearing from.
Thanks for listening to the Dad Up Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next weekly episode. While you're at it, leave a rating and review. And if you know someone this show can help, be sure to share it with them. Want to learn more? Check out the website at daduptribe.com or leave Bryan a message on Instagram at daduppodcast.